my mother kept insisting that you're going to go to college. Well, yeah, that's true, but you have to pay to get into college. It's not free. It's not $5 a semester. By that time, when I got out of high school, I was talking with, and we decided, a bunch of my friends and I were talking about going to college, and one guy said, you know, I found out that if you join the National Guard, every 3 months they will give you a check for $30. And man, that's big money. And so, of all things, we all decided we would go and join the Guard, a bunch of us all at once. And this was on June 21st, I say June 21st of 1948. And sure enough, that's what you could do. You could join and you could get $30 every month. Just all you had to do was be at drill on a couple of nights, 4 nights a week, at $2.50 a drill period. And 3 months later, you got a check for $30. Well, you don't think that's a lot of money, do you? But back in those days, guess what tuition was in the local college? $36 a semester. That paid for almost a semester of college, just going to a guard drill. You know, you say, that's fantastic. That, you know, that little money covered that much. But that's the way it was. And so you had money to go to college, and you had money left over if you want to take a girl out for a date or go to a movie or whatever have you. Just think of the value that was. So the Guard overpaid us because we got more than we gave, I think. But at any rate, went through our training, etc. And I started out as a wireman. You know, you lay wire for communications. I was in a field artillery headquarters. And so I learned all there was to know that I could learn on part-time training about the field artillery in the 32nd Infantry Division. But at any rate, went through our training, etc. And I started out as a wireman. You know, you lay wire for communications. I was in a field artillery headquarters. And so I learned all there was to know that I could learn on part-time training about the field artillery in the 32nd Infantry Division.
So after serving 3 years as a wireman, what made you decide to go to officer candidate school? Is that the route that you took, or how did you commission?
Well, that's a good question, because I discovered I was appreciated, my work was appreciated, so I was almost immediately after a year and a half of service promoted to a sergeant first class.
A year and a half?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of vacancies. The division had come back from World War II fighting in New Guinea and the islands of the Pacific against the Japanese. So when they came back from service, they lost a lot of people. So it was rebuilding itself, and it wasn't being done swiftly. But so you got pushed into positions where you get the rank because you were there and they needed you, and so you got promoted pretty rapidly. Now I was talking about, you know, how long it takes nowadays. It takes a long time. But back in those days, I got promoted to sergeant first class. So I had 2 rockers. Anyhow, so it was to my advantage. And somebody said to me, hey, you know that there's a new deal out now where they will allow people with double stripes, double rockers, to apply for becoming a second lieutenant. If you're a double rocker and you pass the Army General School requirements in Fort Riley, Kansas, you'll get appointed as a second lieutenant. I said, gee, that sounds great, which is what I did. So I enrolled in the school at Fort Riley, Kansas, and by correspondence back and forth, I finished the Army General School in 2 months.
Really?
Yeah, really. I was sending them back while they were sending them to me. I mean, it was done very efficiently and very rapidly. So what happened is that by then I had transferred to Marquette University. Tuition was a little bit more expensive there than $36 a semester. It was up to $500 a semester. Things had changed.
Yes.
Well, it was a private school and didn't have nuns who didn't ask for a salary or anything. So I enrolled in Marquette and still kept the Guard because it was providing me a lot of money. $30 every 3 months, good grief. Who can ask for anything else?
Yeah.
So anyhow, it worked out nicely for me, but I had to appear before General Waldemar Breidster, Brigadier General. He was the chief of artillery for the division. He was the head of division artillery, 4 battalions of artillery, 3 105 battalions and 1 155 battalion. Shoots a little bit further with a bigger shell. So by that time, I knew this stuff very well. I was very good I ran the fire direction center for the battalion.
What
I was an SFC.
Oh.
So I was still a SFC until General Waldemar Breidster said, "Yes, I'll take you as a second lieutenant. Congratulations." So I became a second lieutenant. So here I am, a brand new second lieutenant. The requirement I had to make, though, I was commissioned with a catch. I had to go off to Field Artillery Basic School at Fort Sill, or I lose my commission. I spent the winter of 1953 in a tent in Oklahoma, where Fort Sill is located. Chilly.
Very chilly there during that time.
Yeah.
It is
So,
a crazy environment.
but the commanding general said that it was adequate housing. Therefore, we didn't get housing allowance.
So
Because,
you stayed in a tent in the wintertime in Oklahoma without housing.
well, that's the way it was. The general had the say. When he said no housing allowance, well, that was it. No, they did put some they did put some natural gas heaters in the tents, but you had to sleep pretty close to that heater, otherwise you got miserably cold. So anyhow, I graduated from there, and I had accepted my one of 28 job offers to work in Sandia in Albuquerque, and that takes care of that. That shows the beginning of everything.
So during this time, when did you get married and start your family?
It was after I came to Sandia. It was when I met my first wife, Gloria Silva. She was born in Taos, raised in Santa Fe, came down to Albuquerque to enroll in the University of New Mexico. And it was then that I met her. In fact, I was living in the men's dormitory on base, run by Sandia, and she was living in the women's dormitory, and she was moving out to work for 2 doctors, male, female. She was going to babysit their children at the same time trying to take a number of classes at the University of New Mexico. So I really made a big impression on her the first day because I helped her move because she needed some help. And it was such a great relationship. She said, "It was nice meeting you, John." I didn't tell her my name was George.
So she didn't even know your name at the time.
I was just another Joe Blow.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but I punished her by marrying her. I showed her.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyhow, that takes care of me getting down to Sandia.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, in the meantime, I had to go through many clearances. I had to go through top secret military. I had to go through get a Q clearance. I had to, as time went on, I had to get a top secret military clearance. So that was the beginning of my clearances.
Wow. And was this for just your job within the national labs, or was it also for the Guard that you had to get some of these clearances?
Both.
Both. So
Yeah.
between them, you could just...
The higher you go, the more you have to be cleared.
Yeah.
And so I did my work at Sandia under the Q clearance for the most part. And I also had to get a cryptographic clearance. That was for crypto work. So I had a lot of clearances.
So how supportive was National Sandia Labs with your obligations in the Guard? As you started getting more responsibility in the National Guard, what did they do to help you?
Well, they gave me time off reasonably. I could use my vacation as, a day here, a day there, what have you. So they were very accommodating. When things happened and you needed a day off to do it, you got a day off. But it came out of your vacation typically. But the nice thing is you were allowed 5 weeks vacation a year. So it's a pretty good benefit. They were trying to bring people out west, who wanted to go to a desert town, Albuquerque, wherever it is on the map.
Yeah.
It's just out of the normal places you're used to. So to get people attracted to come out there, they gave a lot of extra benefits. They gave not timeshare, they contributed to the purchase of stock. And AT&T, it was being run by AT&T at the time. And so they had a share method where you could put in your money, they would put in money to match it, and you got a lot of stock. So I ended up with a lot of shares of AT&T, and that has contributed directly to my retirement pay, a lot of it. That's a thumbnail sketch of what's gone on. As far as the other things are concerned, it'd be nice if you were able to talk to a lot of the people, or some of the people I've mentioned, because they know a lot about why things happened and when they happened. One of the things that happened to me was a glitch in getting promoted. It's automatic to go to first lieutenant. You don't have to do anything. And when I graduated from the field artillery school, it was automatic that with time you got promoted for first lieutenant, and the same to captain. The artillery school qualified me through captain, but you had to go through an advanced officer's course to become a major. And so I deferred that for a while so that I could start my master's work at the University of New Mexico, trying to trade off. And the way things sat at the time, it looked like it was going to be a long time to go from captain to major, because we had too many officers and too few spots. And so I took the risk, if you want to call it that, of going to the University of New Mexico and deferring my studies to become qualified for major. And lo and behold, all of a sudden there was a tremendous change in our structure. All of a sudden the Army decided that they wanted the formation of groups. And that way group headquarters would be created. And New Mexico was going to did get two group headquarters. So all of a sudden there was promotion opportunity for about, I think it was 12 field grade positions. And I could have been one of those 12, except that I wasn't qualified because I had made the decision to go work on the master's versus doing the military right then and there to stay abreast. So I thought, this is not a good decision, George. You didn't think it through very carefully. But as it turns out, everybody went past me. Not everybody, a few went past me because they were qualified and I wasn't. So they bypassed me even though they had less seniority, and they got promoted. Well, that happens sometimes. So what you do is you grin and bear it. I used to say I was a captain for I was a captain for 9 years and a major for 7 years because there was nowhere to go, no vacancies. So that was a bad thing, and I thought, well, I'm gonna get frozen out and just never get promoted. So it took me like 17 years to get to lieutenant colonel. And so it took a long time before I got promoted. And what happened is that the Army allowed us to stay over age and grade. Yeah, so we could stay in instead of getting bounced out after so many years in rank. That, you know, usually that means you're not going to get promoted because your performance is not that good. I thought, I'm never going to go anywhere because no place to go.
Did that affect your mindset when you were serving in those positions? How many different jobs did you have?
Oh, all of them. I was intelligence officer, communications officer, liaison officer, assistant S3, you name it, whatever there was as an officer to be, that's what I was. I served in a lot of positions. Not all of them were fun, but some of them were fun. The job I enjoyed the most was being in the S3 because you were doing something. You were creating future operations, and you had the right to write the orders to the satisfaction of the battalion commander. And so I really enjoyed being in the S3 section. And I worked for Tom Taylor for a lot of time. And Tom Taylor was the guy making the decision. I had great trust in Tom Taylor. He was my predecessor as the brigade commander. So I had a lot of confidence in him. I was in the 3rd Battalion. Tom was the XO. Norman Wellman was the battalion commander. But for all intents and purposes, Norman Wellman let Tom and me do our work. Tom was the XO, I was the S3. And we thought a lot alike. I had great admiration for Tom Taylor. And so anyhow, we got a call, said somebody shot up the courthouse at Tierra Maria, and we want the battalion to form and move north at midnight. So that was, so all of a sudden, everybody is over at the armory showing up. They've been, the phone system worked great, called them all in. So we got everything racked and stacked, and off we went to the intersection of Highway 64, I think it was, and 85, I'm not sure of the numbers, but we got just south of Tierra Maria. But we stopped there. Why did we stop? Well, we didn't have our ammunition yet, because it turns out that Santa Fe had no ammunition. We had to pick it up from the base, Sandia base, or Kirtland base, however you want to call it. And so Tom Taylor, Harry Taylor, Tom's brother, was a major. His job was to get down to Albuquerque on the base, pick up all the rifle ammunition, all the handgun ammunition, anything else in the way of ammunition, and meet us at that intersection of whatever those two street highway numbers were. So we get there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we wait for a while, and all of a sudden, Harry Taylor shows up, and he's got the ammunition. He's passing it out like it's lollipops. So even the state police got ammunition from us, because they didn't have enough ammunition.
Wow.
In case there had to be a shootout or shoot-em-ups. So anyhow, we were at that intersection, just lined up, ready to go into Tierra Maria. Norm Wellman said, we don't know where this group is under the leadership of a guy named Reyes Tijerina. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the battalion up. Yeah, take D battery and most of the headquarters section, and I was the S3, and take some of the commo section, and you go behind this mountain going up I think it was 64, go up. There's a little place about 10 miles inland from there, and north of that place is a campground about 5 miles north of there. So my job was to lead half of the battalion, so to speak, off into this other direction. So we got up short of this little community, and I didn't want a whole bunch of these desperados to be on the side of the road as we're driving through and shooting everything up. So I told everybody to stay there, and I went forward with my sergeant, that was Bob Adler, Sergeant Major Bob Adler, ultimately. And I had Al Fanning in there riding shotgun, so the three of us in this troop drove through this little town. If there was going to be any shooting, it was just one vehicle getting shot at. And so I was in radio contact with the rest of the people behind me. So sure enough, we go through this place at 3 o'clock in the morning and had no trouble. So we ordered them to come in, and we went up this side road, whatever it was, up to this camping area. As soon as we got to the camp area, we set up a GP medium for headquarters, and we then sent D Battery out to run all of the trails, all of the road trails that were in the area, to see if they could somehow find, or at least know, where the Tijerina and his band of merry bandits were. So anyhow, that happened until daylight, and they came back home with nobody in sight. In the meantime, we couldn't talk to headquarters on the other side of the mountain because we had FM radios.
Yes.
And they don't work in mountainous territory. So what we did is we set up a backup. We had our FM radio with us in this campground area. We set a Jeep and down to the turn where we had the original talk, and we'd communicate to there and then pass that on to our headquarters on the other side of the mountain in and near Tierra Amarilla. So it's interesting how these happens. You don't have the equipment that you need. We needed AM kind of transmission instead of FM, because it doesn't go through mountains or over mountains. So that's kind of interesting the way that happened.
How many other missions did you do?
Well, we were also called in for riot duty a couple of years. Yeah, maybe you've heard of that.
Yes.
Yeah, the first time we were called in by the governor or assistant governor, I can't remember which it was, but the university student center had been taken over by a band of students, or we thought, or maybe not, but anyhow, taken over by somebody, and we had to get rid of them. So what we heard is that we have state police assistants at the door. They can't get out right now, and nobody can go in right now, but they need the guard to help balance the forces.
Yeah.
So we got down with our battalion, and we'd had riot training, fortunately. And so it was a confused mess where we first came in with our vehicles, the trucks with all the soldiers and what have you. So as soon as we got out of our vehicles, Tom Taylor ordered bayonets to be fixed.
Wow.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
What you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. In a confused situations like that, you put the bayonets in place. Or maybe it's going to be too late to do it if you're in some other situation, but while we were able to do so, Tom ordered the bayonets to be fixed. So we went in with fixed bayonets. So anyhow, we were able to circle the university building, and then the state police went in and they arrested them all. I don't know how they got them out of there, but then we went, Tom, being our commander, said, how many people have blood on their bayonets. So we conducted a search, and we had like half a dozen with blood on the bayonets. So that took care. We didn't get a very good reputation out of that because a lot of people were against the war in Vietnam at the time, and a lot of people favored what the students were doing. And it was, the students were doing all sorts of things like breaking plate glass windows and what have you. So a year later, we're down at annual training at Fort Bliss. And we'd been out on the firing range and out in the maneuver areas. And we were at full strength. Because we had like 50 reservists came in to fill out our ranks. So we were at 750 soldiers in the battalion, something like that. And so all of a sudden we hear that there's a riot in Albuquerque on the radio. And the more the information came in, the more it was apparent that something was going to have to be done with the Guard. And so sure enough, 3rd Battalion got a call, deploy immediately to Albuquerque. So what happened is that Tom, I was the XO at the time, Tom Taylor said, we have an airplane down here that'll hold about 30. So I want you to take, to me, he said, I want you to take 30 up to Albuquerque, fly in. We'll have somebody meet you up there and take command and control of the armory on Wyoming Boulevard.
Wow.
We didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So sure enough, we had people that had the keys to the building. And so we would start controlling. As soon as we got in there, we got picked up. We had to stand on the airplane, for the whole flight. It was not, and there were no stewardesses to give us booze or anything.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we made it up there, and we got our transportation over to the headquarters. We got the building secured, and then about 8 or 9 hours later, Tom showed up with the rest of the battalion. And so we then paid attention to what was going on the radio and on telephone calls. And they finally decided that all of the people raising hell and breaking windows and shooting at people, they're all down at Roosevelt Park. What we did is we took 3 batteries down there. We took B battery out of Belen Socorro. We had D battery out of, C battery out of Gallup and what was the other one? Farmington. And we had A battery out of Albuquerque. And so we all went to the edge of Roosevelt Park and sat there until curfew time. The whole theory was as soon as curfew starts, we will then push these people out of Roosevelt Park into the waiting hands of all of the police, which are at the other end of the park. So we'll just move along and gas in front of them. So we all were going to be ready to put them all in the Huskar when we caught them. In the meantime, while we're waiting before the curfew occurred, a bunch of these young toughs decided that they wanted to confront and get rifles from the C battery, which was over in front of one of the buildings of TVI. And they were throwing Molotov cocktails over their heads onto the roofs of these buildings, starting the buildings on fire at the roof. And so they thought that that was enough for them to weaken, put people up on the roof that they could overpower and steal rifles from the rest of the battery there. So Tom Taylor said to Al Fanning, who was a major, and he was the S3 at the time in the battalion, he said, why don't you go down to C battery, because they got a brand new commander, maybe doesn't have a feeling for what has to be done or hasn't been trained as we have been trained. I'd like you down there because you know what's going on. So Al Fanning went down there, and And what he did, he got a medal for heroism because he went down there with a box of hand grenades, you know, the gas grenades. Are you familiar with them? You pull the pin and in 4/10 of a second it explodes.
Yes.
As he got down there with the grenades, gas grenades, all of a sudden a gang of about 30 kids, young men, came running at him to cross the street. They were separated by a street and they ran across to try and get rifles from them. So with great forethought, Al had passed these hand grenades. He peppered them. In the 3-second time, all of these hand grenades exploded and formed a gas cloud over all these people running to try and cross the street and take the rifles.
Yeah.
Then it stopped. It's like they ran into a wall. As soon as they smelled the gas, it incapacitates you. So sure enough, all of a sudden, the time came for curfew. Tom asked me to read the curfew order, which I did. I read it over the loudspeaker system. And as soon as that happened, we all marched and pushed them through Roosevelt Park with the gas providers from the 515th Maintenance Battalion. They had a couple of motorized gas spewers, and they walked with us, and you know, with the masks on and everything. And we drove those suckers out of that park as fast as they could run. And the people that got gassed too badly, we'd pull them out, take them we had people, the medics with us, and they would take care of people that were already overcome by the gas. But at the other end, sure enough, they ended up in the police city buses, courtesy of the city, and drove them all to be charged at and put in the pokey. So the only trouble with that whole exercise is that for weeks thereafter, nobody could use Roosevelt Park. It was a beautiful park.
Yeah.
But every time they'd walk, they'd stir up some of the gas pellets.
Yes.
And the people that lived on the edge of it, they had to put up with that for weeks after it was all over, because we really sprayed that area.
I've heard that you did some training in Germany.
Oh yeah, the headquarters of the brigade, Air Defense Artillery Brigade, is constructed with a area control of the airspace, and we have trained for that for years and years and years, because we were Air Defense Artillery for many years. So we would go back to Germany and work with them in their air defense elements and train with them, and always got the comment that we are well trained. You know more than we know because you have less turnover in the Guard than the active component has. Yeah. So they were happy to have us to spell them, so to speak, with a period of time we were doing the work. So yes, we always had good relationships with the Americans in Germany.
How did your family deal with you leaving during training?
It was hard on the family. Mm-hmm. I think I indicated when I was in the War College, I essentially lived in one of my bedrooms for 2 years, trying to stay abreast of all the reading that had to be done, all of the formats, you know, coming up with the outline as how you're going to address this issue. And it took us 2 years to go around the world. In other words, every 6 weeks, we examined a different area of the world. And as we did that, then we had to analyze how do we use the elements of power of the United States. Have you been through the war? No, you're too young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something I'm looking forward to, though.
Yeah, well, be prepared is all I can say. If you could do it if you could attend it for the 9 months or whatever it is, that's by far the easiest way to do it. If you get assigned as do it by correspondence, tremendously requirements. I would not recommend that. I've been through it,
Yeah.
but now that I'm through it, it's far easier to do it
In person.
on site, in person. But at any rate, you take what you get. But the reason I signed up for it, I wasn't chosen for it. Well, let me rephrase that. I read that Herb Temple, if you know Herb Temple, you wouldn't know him. He was one of the full-time people at the National Guard Bureau in the Pentagon. At the time, I think he was a 2-star, but I read that he was in the war. He had been sent to the War College. And that's kind of an interesting thought that I'll expand upon later. But at any rate, I thought, well, if all of a sudden they're taking National Guardsmen, I think I'll apply. I'm footloose and fancy-free. I'll sign up and see what happens. So I applied for it, and sure enough, I got accepted. And that became 2 years of extremely difficult times, because as you have noticed, I had to work, I had to go to drill, I had to do the War College. It was extremely demanding, very demanding. And I was happy to get through with it, and thank God I did. Every 6 weeks you would wait for the response to what you had provided. And you would wait for the letter back from the commandant, and the first line would say, "You have met the requirements." So that was what the very first sentence is, what you look for. Because if it said you nowhere near met the requirements, that meant you were going to bust out. Let me tell you about something else that I haven't told you about.
Okay.
And that has to do with going to Brave Shield 78. I was in command of the maintenance battalion at the time. And I was to take command when we went out to the National Training Center. I was to take command of Arizona Light Equipment Maintenance Unit and Utah Heavy Equipment Maintenance Unit. And so that was my assignment with my headquarters. I also was required to take care of all the spare parts exchange. And this was an exercise, as you say, if you've ever been out to the Desert Training Center, yeah, there's nothing out there but nothing.
That's usually the way training centers are out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, it was the 9th Division maneuvering against the 7th Division, two Army divisions. But the National Guard, for all intents and purposes, did all of the other than combat actions. So we performed admirably well, I think, in my own humble, unbiased opinion.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things that happened is that in reading up all of the literature that had to do with what was going to be going on in April in the National Training Center, it was going to be 85 for a daily high. And so I thought, well, I don't want to sleep in one of my Arctic bags. You know, you're all issued an Arctic sleeping bag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my personal olive drab colored sleeping bag. You know, bigger, more room, and it's not going to be that cold. Well, I also said to my soldiers, I want you to make a shower out of a buffalo and use a kitchen heater element. And I want you to have all the hardware necessary that we can shower, because there's nothing that I've seen that says we're going to have a shower unit out there. So sure enough, these guys, being good as they are, they made a shower for me. And guess what? When we got out to Fort Irwin, it was colder than an Arctic. The average daily high was like 40 degrees, and the wind was blowing at 20 knots, as it will in the spring in the desert. And man, was it cold. A lot of my guys were coming down with colds and coughs and everything else, sleeping in their Arctic bag, so to speak, and it was still too cold for them because of the wind velocity. So guess what I did? I took my Arctic bag, I slipped it inside of my civilian bag. I slept as warm as could be. Had no trouble whatsoever. But I was lucky as all get up because that wasn't the original intent, was to use both of them, but it was so cold that I pushed mine in to the civilian version of a sleeping bag. So I was not affected by the cold weather. But also, on the other hand, it turns out that the heating element we used for the kitchen heating element that we used just couldn't quite get the water in the water buffalo warm enough. It took it, even if it was on all day, water would still come out at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And with the wind blowing, remember. So guess who took a shower in that situation?
You took a shower?
Yours truly. I was the guy that ordered it. I was the guy that had to try it out, and no one else did it because in the meantime, an Army Reserve shower unit came into the area, and so you could get warm showers without even blinking your eye.
But you asked your soldiers, so you had to do it, right?
That's right. I had ordered it, and I said, it's for us. And so I had to shower, freezing my buns off, I'll tell you. So, sometimes you can plan ahead too far.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you say it, you got to eat it. I mean, you buy it, you eat it. So, one of those interesting incidents that happened. But we took care of the repair parts, and I think that Rudy Gonzalez, who was a warrant officer in our unit, he took care of it like because he did USP and FO stuff in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
So, duck soup to try and take care of the, this division wants a tank motor. Okay, give me a requisition, you get your tank motor, that sort of thing. He did it very professionally. And I was blessed by having a wonderful performance by my guys out there. And again, you could say I'm just the luck of only having such wonderful non-coms. But that's what makes up the Army.
Yeah.
You have well-trained and well-intentioned people, and the commander gets the blame or he gets the credit. So you better look for good non-coms. And I had good non-coms. I had great sergeants major. That I think maybe I told you a little bit about Bob Atler. Maybe I haven't. Bob Atler, he was Hispanic, and he was, when I came in as a second lieutenant commander, he was the guy that helped me the most because he had just got back from 2 years in Germany, and so he told me everything to do and introduced me to all the other non-coms, and it turns out that he ended up being with me almost every spot I went. Bob Adler was with me, except when I was commanding the maintenance battalion. But he ended up being my operations sergeant when I was the assistant 3 and the 3. He also became my command sergeant major when I was brigade commander. So he stuck with me thick and thin. Happy to have him. Wonderful guy. And I have seen him after we both retired, but lately I've not been able to find out where he is. But he had a habit. He and his wife Stella had a habit of, once they're satisfied with the town, they wanted to move someplace else. I don't understand that, but they'd moved. We went to visit them in Houston, and then they decided Houston wasn't for them, so they moved up to Yakima in Washington, because then they left Yakima because that wasn't the place for them. They went up to Cedro Woolley, that wasn't the place for them. They could have, for all I know, they have died, but were out of touch. But I guess the point I want to make is that we developed a lifelong friendship. And you couldn't ask for a better non-commissioned officer and a sergeant major,
Yeah.
brigade sergeant major, than him.
And you're part of a couple organizations and wrote the bylaws for the New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. After I retired, I worked for free on the National Guard Association committee as the Army retiree representative. So I worked for them, attended all the meetings, and helped revise the bylaws. And I worked for the Guard for 20 years after I retired. So had a good time. A lot of people I knew were still active. So I would see the active people I knew. A lot of people disappeared, retired and went heaven knows where. But it was a pleasure serving with those who were still in the Guard and who I'd worked with before. I also had an organization, or I organized every 3 months we would have a retiree luncheon. And so I had up to 28 of retirees come to lunch and exchange opinions as to how good civilian life was or wasn't, as the case may be. But I would bring in the adjutant general to speak at any meeting he wanted to attend. In fact, there was one meeting where I had 4 generals in attendance, 3 National Guard former AGs, and 1 active duty Major General Air Force came because he was my golf partner. And I said, come on over, you'll find out what's going on. Because he had a good opinion of the Guard, even though he was Air Force. He was also my golf partner. So we got along very well together in spite of him being of a foreign service.
Foreign service.
Anyhow, we used to razz each other a lot.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he was a wonderful guy. He's now passed away. But a lot of guys got a lot of cheer out of coming to these quarterly luncheons. And it worked very well up until the time I left. So anyhow, that was another sort of thing. I kept my thumb in the pie just to stay used to the feeling by doing those 2 things. I got onto the board of the Guard Association, and I also ran the luncheon for about a dozen years. So kept in touch that way. Got to see who was still alive, got to see what they were doing, and got to hear what they thought about this, that, and the other thing. So the adjutants general never hesitated about coming and talk to us. They always considered it a pleasure and happy to do it. So, and they like to see people they used to see also. A lot of the Guard AGs have been lower ranking and working up to the point where they become the AG. So they enjoy seeing people they haven't seen for a while. Well, as you well know, there's a great impact on the family because you're not there when they need something. And so I think I told you that when I was enrolled in the War College, it was so demanding, it was so different than other military kind of stuff because you were trying to consider the other things besides military power. You were trying to think of what the advantages we had, what are the power elements that the United States has in addition to the military. Well, you had to worry about the economics, you had to worry about technology, what can they bring to the system, had to worry about what are our resources, do we rely upon steel from Russia or oil from China, or can we be independent? So And the political will, you also have to judge the political will of the populace. How much is the populace willing to support us in the military? So, that has an impact upon how much of importance the military is to that mixture of all these elements of power. And so those were the things you had to examine and develop. You had to develop your position on answering the questions that came along with the exam. All of the books you get, you had to send a no less than a 2 full-page analysis of the situation on these locations throughout the world. The Near East, the Far East, South America, Africa. Where do we want to put our resources, etc.? What kind of diplomatic help do we need? Everything almost except the military. We had to study all that stuff. So that was foreign to a lot of people. I think I may have told you that I went into one of our bedrooms. The oldest son had left, so I was in one of the bedrooms, and I just stayed in that bedroom for 2 years. It's not that bad, but that's the way it seemed. But my wife, Gloria, was just perfect. She helped every way she could, and my kids used to razz me about hiding from them because I was doing all that work. And I think I've told you what they would send you. Every 6 weeks, they would send you a pallet of that much books, papers, and everything you had. And then it asked the question, how would you do this? How would you argue this or argue that? What should our position be with respect to this region of the world? And what elements of power are the most effective, and why?
Was your wife part of any family support groups? Or?
Yes. She worked with a number of women in the headquarters area to come up with how we do the Christmas celebration, or whatever was going on, passing out information about what's going on in the Army and what changes might affect us in the Guard. There was a lot of that going on. And in fact, Michael's wife got heavily involved in that. There are a lot of women that helped. And I think the Guard is better for it, getting a woman's opinion. One time, I brought my wife down we got a free weekend in the middle. And one time I brought my wife and children down for a couple of reasons. First, she got to see it and know what was going on. The other thing is they came down by train, which I don't know if that exists anymore or not, but I'm glad that we gave the kids the chance to go by train so that they had enjoyed the trip, all the trip down from Albuquerque to Fort Bliss, or actually El Paso, and back. A very, very enjoyable trip for the kids. They really enjoyed it and still remember it. But wives are valued because of the load they have to carry.
How has the military impacted your family life as far as, do you have family members who continue their service?
Michael has, of course. Of course, he joined after I left, just because of the age situation. I had to leave at age 60. That's as long as I could stay. But he went, and he was in ROTC in college. So he did his ROTC work. And then he decided that he would come over and join the Guard instead, which I think is the wise move. But, to where everyone to their own moves. But he has enjoyed the Guard, and he's done okay. He's had a couple of, combat assignments. He went over with the division force for the invasion of Iraq. He also spent a year in Afghanistan. So he's been around. He's got a lot of C-17 time. He's been to, the foreign countries he's been to: Romania, Japan, Germany. Oh my gosh, when I stop to think of all the places he's been in connection with the Guard, he's had a lot of flying time, if you will. Maybe he can get a free seat now. He's had so many flight hours that he can get a free seat on any C-17. If it's still in the service, I don't know.
Yeah. So what do you think the greatest benefit the Guard has given you in your lifetime?
One thing, a great retirement. And another thing, the fact that you're recognized for what you've done. And you still have the camaraderie that you can see the people you serve with. Those are still alive, obviously. But yeah, there are a lot of pluses. I can't think of anything negative, really.